Adana, now 58, and Malik, 60, first met in the early 1990s when they were both students in Toronto. She was studying journalism at the time, smart, attentive to detail, with a penetrating eye and a keen sense of the mood of those around her. He was studying business, dreaming of starting his own company and having a clear aptitude for negotiation. They met by chance on the university campus when they were both waiting for an appointment with a tutor. However, fate decided otherwise. Their acquaintance quickly grew into a friendship and then exploded into passionate love. After graduation, they soon got married. Some people thought it was too soon, but they were not deterred by such reservations. Adana wanted a more relaxed atmosphere than in a metropolis like Toronto, while Malik believed that even in a small town, business opportunities could be found. So they chose Cobourg, a picturesque seaside town with friendly neighbors and a cozy atmosphere. They settled there. Their marriage, which has lasted for 30 years, has often been a source of envy. The couple had 2 children, Amara and Derek. Amara, energetic and ambitious, moved to Toronto right after college to pursue a career in pharmaceuticals. Derek, although more reserved, had a flair for technology, so he moved to a neighboring city and found a job in the IT field. Everyone in Cobourg saw Malik and Anna's family as an example of cohesion and sincere commitment. Moreover, their neighbors often told them, "You guys are like a unit, made for each other." Later, when the children moved away and it was just the 2 of them left in the house, invisible cracks suddenly began to appear in the couple's relationship. At first, Anna thought it was just a waning of passion due to their age and long life together, so she didn't worry too much. But every day she became more and more confused by something in Malik's behavior, as if he was keeping a secret, and it made her anxious. The uncertainty grew like a shadow, and Adana began to wonder if it was just a fading of feelings, or if her husband was hiding something special. Her friends, neighbors, and children thought it was typical of a long marriage. After so many years, things can occasionally go downhill. However, Anna herself felt that the atmosphere in the house had changed in a subtle but very real way. At the beginning of their 31st year of marriage, Malik began to regularly stay late at work. He would come home much later, explaining that he had urgent business or unexpected meetings with a client. They used to have all the documents, receipts, and reports lying on the kitchen table so they could discuss financial matters together. Now he started locking them in a cabinet, as if he was afraid someone would read them. These changes disturbed Anna and made her question everything she had taken for granted. She missed the openness and warmth of her past, but now she felt only a cold distance, as if a transparent but obvious wall had been built between her and her husband. And she couldn't help thinking that the reason for this distance was something completely different than just fatigue or age-related fading. Fears grew in her heart that Malik was playing a double game that she did not even realize. Phone calls became one of the biggest worries for Anna. As soon as his cell phone rang, Malik would either answer, muttering barely audibly, or he would go into another room and carefully close the door behind him. When he came back, he looked frowning and anxious, as if he was discussing some secret business that he was afraid to reveal to his wife. "Is everything okay? Maybe something has happened?" She tried to find out, recalling their previous frank conversations. But he sighed angrily. "I'm busy. Now is not the time to discuss this." This reaction was extremely unusual for her and only increased her uncertainty. The constant impression of impeccability that the couple created among the people of Cobourg prevented Anna from opening up to anyone and asking for advice. She was ashamed to play the role of a jealous wife, and the neighbors explained his strange behavior by saying that he was doing business, meeting with clients outside the house. No one publicly reproached Malik. The neighbors from this seaside town respected his privacy, and there was never a direct quarrel. Nevertheless, Anna's heart was growing increasingly restless. Her mind told her that nothing catastrophic was likely to happen, but her heart had a different opinion. She remembered how they had confided in each other without hesitation during the decades of their marriage. So why was he hiding everything now? Maybe he had a mistress. Or, worse, a serious illness that he was afraid to admit. The clouds of doubt thickened every day. Formally, there were no reasons for the quarrel. Malik remained polite. There was no aggression or defiance in his actions, but this alienation did not disappear. Adana noticed another detail. Whereas before his phone would lie quietly on the table even when he went to the bathroom, now he carried it with him all the time. One day, she overheard him at the door, saying quietly, "I can't talk. I'll call you later." It sounded tense. Then Malik came out agitated, his eyes showing fear and confusion, and immediately went outside in silence, as if he needed air. All this only strengthened Anna's conviction. He is hiding something from me. She imagined all sorts of possibilities: debt, an affair, or perhaps some kind of illness. But the flower receipts she found and the disconnected phone on the nights she called him seemed particularly suspicious. She was almost certain Malik was cheating, and at the same time, she felt guilty for assuming such a thing about the person she cared about most. Most of all, she wanted an honest, open conversation, but her husband stubbornly avoided any explanation. As soon as she realized that she could not expect him to be forthcoming, she was determined to start her own investigation. The decision came to her in the middle of the night, when she could hear Malik's steady breathing next to her without closing her eyes. At first, she focused on how the funds were distributed in the joint and separate accounts. She found some statements in the office folder. To her surprise, there were transactions from coffee shops and restaurants during the time he was supposedly at the office. Flower expenses were also recorded, but she had not received any bouquets. Comparing the dates and amounts with his work schedule, she realized that they did not match at all. Then she came up with the idea to follow her husband's routes. Amara's daughter had once given her a small GPS tracker, half-jokingly, to keep an eye on the car. Now, Adana attached the device to Malik's car. Even though it was risky, she needed some information. Thanks to an app on her phone, she could see exactly where the car was stopped. When Malik's phone was turned off and the GPS showed that the car had been parked for hours on 11th Street, or in remote areas of Coburg, she knew that he was not at all on business meetings. However, she still did not know who she or he was. Amara's daughter spoke to her mother from time to time, noting that her voice sounded worried, but attributed it to a generational conflict. Her son, Derek, was more responsive. "Mom, aren't you worried that Dad doesn't need a medical checkup?" But Adana was too afraid to tell the truth, lest she deprive her children of respect for their father. So several weeks dragged on without a concrete result. Who exactly the mistress was remained a mystery, although Anna was sure that Malik was unfaithful to her. She only wanted clear evidence of this person. In the meantime, her patience was almost gone. She almost brought Malik to a direct conversation several times, asking, "Are you really sure that all the meetings are working? Can you explain in more detail?" However, she heard only aggressive excuses or silence in response. I decided to delay the open confrontation for a while. I wanted to be absolutely sure of my evidence. And fate itself prepared the right moment. Malik had left his cell phone at home in a hurry. That morning, he was fussing about getting ready for an urgent meeting and was dressed for a festive occasion rather than a weekday. When asked to explain, he angrily brushed it off. "I'm in a terrible hurry," and disappeared out the door in an instant. A minute later, when she walked into the kitchen, Anna noticed his phone, carelessly thrown on the table next to the charger. Her heart was racing. Here it was, a real chance to find out something. But she hesitated. Am I betraying my principles by doing this? Will I be able to live with this act? Her mind whirled, but her desire to find the truth could no longer be drowned out by those moral doubts. She remembered that her birthday had once been the unlock code, and she had seen Malik dialing those numbers more than once. Carefully, she entered the familiar 6 digits, and the screen came to life. First, she checked the messaging app. Nothing special, mostly work-related text messages. There was no trace of her in the messenger at all. Everything important seemed to have been erased. And then she noticed the screenshots folder in the gallery. Perhaps it would contain something that her husband hadn't deleted. When Anna unlocked the first image, she saw a screenshot of a short message with explicit messages like "love" and "can't wait." The following files only reinforced her suspicions. They said, "We'll make it work. No one has to know. And this risk makes my life more colorful." It was as if Adana was numb, realizing that her husband could have written this to someone else. The initials K were mentioned in the text, but no names were given, only phrases like, "You make me feel alive again, K." However, one screenshot contained more details. "Kiona, I'm grateful to fate for you. You give me everything I lack at home. Your M. Dot." This left no doubt as to who the dialogue was with. Stunned, Adana did not realize at first that it was 52-year-old Kiona, the godmother of their son Derek and a longtime family friend. In the past, this woman was always there for them. She nursed the baby when he was sick and helped organize home parties. It turns out that she is Malik's secret lover. Everything inside her shrank as soon as she realized K definitely means Kiona. Anger and pain flooded her soul. This was not just some random affair, but a connection with a person who was supposed to be an ally of their family. The mention of the godmother in the context of passionate confessions was outrageous and confusing even more. Now it turned out that the two people closest to her had committed a betrayal. Putting the phone down, she slowly sat up, feeling dizzy. Memories came flooding back to her. How Kiona had sat at the table with them. How she and Malik had joked together. How she had been tending to the family's cooking. But now, all those images from the past had a new flavor. She wanted to cry and scream and smash the damn smartphone against the wall. But she held back. "I need to calm down, think about the next step," she decided, turning off the screen and carefully returning the phone to its place. In the afternoon, when Malik realized that he had forgotten his cell phone and looked around nervously, Anna pretended to be unaware and unsuspecting. But the usual warmth had already disappeared from her eyes, and Malik must have felt some kind of icy alienation, although he had no idea what it was. After this discovery, when all the fragments of facts came together, it seemed to her that her life was falling apart. For several days, she walked around in a daze, often forgetting to eat or drink. She woke up only when she tried to develop a plan of action. Should I expose Malik and his mistress godmother right here and now? Or is it better to keep my cool and collect more evidence? She wondered, taming the whirlpool of thoughts in her head. Flashbacks haunted her. Images of Kiona, who once seemed to genuinely love the children, kept coming back. But while Adana trusted her with family matters, it turned out that she was also having a secret affair with Malik. Her heart was full of anger mixed with despair. How could I not notice this before? If even your best friend is capable of such a thing, are there any people you can trust? She asked herself. Finally, she decided to at least talk to someone and called Amara. However, realizing that she couldn't tell her daughter everything outright, it would be painful to destroy her father's authority, she limited herself to hinting. "Something is wrong with my dad. I have a feeling that he is hiding something from me. I'm worried." Amara, overwhelmed with work, just brushed it off. "Mom, maybe you and Dad just had a fight. I think everything is fine." The conversation ended on that note. Derek became more attentive. "Mom, I can come over if you need me. You sound worried," he offered. But Adana didn't want the children to witness a loud fight. "I'll handle it myself," she reassured her son. It was too much to bear in silence, but she didn't want the publicity in front of all her friends, neighbors, and family either. In the small town of Coburg, the news would spread instantly, turning into a humiliating discussion. She could not let that happen. A few more days passed. The car's GPS tracking showed that Malik was stopping more and more often at Kiona's home, located near the port. One evening, he again claimed to be on his way to an urgent business meeting wearing his best jacket. Without explaining anything further, he hurried out the door, and Anna remained silent with a frown. She checked the app to see that the signal had stopped in the neighborhood where her cousin lived. "That's it. I can't take it anymore," she decided. After waiting for about half an hour to make sure he had time to go inside, she followed. It didn't matter what the neighbors thought. Now her curiosity and desire to see the truth outweighed any fear. Night was already falling outside. It was raining lightly, and the street lamps cast a dim glow on the narrow path. When she arrived, she could actually see Malik's car in front of Kiona's house. Lights outside the windows, silhouettes visible. Her heart was pounding, her hands were trembling, but her anger was pushing her forward. Adana knocked on the door, sharply, insistently. "Open up!" Her voice was on the verge of breaking. Kiona opened the door, puzzled by the guest's appearance. Malik appeared in the corridor behind her, apparently not expecting such a visit. Tension permeated the room. "Are you ruining our marriage with your godmother?" she asked, sounding extremely quiet but full of such fury that it was frightening. Malik stiffened, and Kiona, trying to maintain some semblance of calm, began. "Adana, listen to me. I didn't want you to find out this way. Malik was unhappy, and she didn't get to continue because Adana burst out screaming. There was a table in the corridor with a marble figurine, probably a decorative souvenir, and this little thing stood out against the background of the scene that was already gaining momentum. It all happened in the blink of an eye. A heated argument erupted, during which Malik tried to explain that feelings in the family had long since faded, and the power of new love is irresistible. Meanwhile, Kiona added with a tremor in her voice, "I was convinced that your marriage no longer existed." But every word they said hurt Anna even more. Finally, in a fit of rage, she quickly grabbed the stone statue and swung it. Malik, retreating, caught himself on a chair or sofa and was struck directly in the temple. He staggered, falling to the floor, and his hand reflexively reached for the bloody area of his face. Everything seemed to happen before they even realized it. Kiona screamed and rushed to Malik, trying to stop the blood. "No! Someone call an ambulance!" she screamed, but her own panic drowned out her own voice. Malik remained silent, bleeding profusely on the carpet, and Adana stood there as if petrified, the statuette in her hand, seemingly unaware of what she had done. The wave of screams and noise had already alerted the neighbors, and in a few minutes the police and paramedics arrived at the door with flashing lights. But the misfortune was inevitable. Malik's life disappeared in that bloody puddle. Confused and in tears, Kiona ran outside for help while neighbors who heard the commotion called 911. 5 minutes passed, and the narrow street was illuminated by the glimpses of a police car and an ambulance. Neighbors began to gather around, asking each other questions in fear. What happened? When the police officers and the medical team entered the house, they saw a terrible scene. Malik was lying unconscious on the floor. His temple was deeply fractured, and a bright red bloodstain was already soaking the carpet. Kiona leaned over him, covered in tears and crimson marks, hopelessly trying to keep him alive. A little further away, Adana stood numb, never letting go of the heavy figure and staring at it with an unseeing gaze. Paramedics tried to save Malik, but soon noted the absence of a pulse and pupil reaction. Apparently, he had suffered an instant cardiac arrest from a severe blow to the head. He was pronounced dead right at the scene. After inspecting the room, the officer asked Anna to put the statuette away and announced her suspicion, reading her rights. As if in a trance, she obeyed, allowing the handcuffs to be fastened. "You are detained on suspicion of murder," the policeman said in an official tone. Beside her, Kiona was wailing, repeating, "It was an accident. He tripped. She didn't mean to." However, the police did not delve into the details. They had to take control, call investigators, and prevent interference. As soon as they took Anna out in handcuffs, the neighbors who had gathered saw her shackled. Some of them were shocked. "Is this Ms. Adana?" Others, not understanding the point, suggested that she might have been injured and wondered why the police were treating her as if she were a criminal. Only a small group near the fence remained silent, knowing full well that something very terrible had just happened in that house. After that, the investigation had to get to the bottom of the details. Law enforcement officers took pictures of the marble statuette and interviewed Kiona, who sobbed and said, "Adana was so angry, she grabbed the thing, and Malik, when he jumped back, stumbled and received a fatal blow." Anna's explanations came out during interrogation at the police station where she was taken. She hardly spoke, only occasionally shuddering as if in deep shock. It seemed that even she did not fully realize what had happened. So, in an instant, the model marriage that had seemed perfect for so many years turned into a bloody murder. The subsequent clarification of the circumstances stunned the whole of Coburg. Those who saw Adana as a balanced and friendly woman could not understand how she could commit such a brutal act. But so far, the information was only fragmentary and speculative. Within days, the tragedy shook the town. A woman took her husband's life when she caught him with their child's godmother. These words, in various variations, were spread in the local media, social networks, and gossip. At first, some refused to believe it, until official data was confirmed. The story was indeed true. Some people sympathized with Anna. She just lost control of herself in despair because of the betrayal. Others blamed her. No matter how many resentments there are, killing a person is a horror. You had to control your emotions. Still, others did not hold back, saying that they did not think Kiona could be so treacherous, as she was considered almost a member of the family. Amara came back from Toronto in a state of deep shock. It seemed unthinkable to her that her mother, so gentle and reserved, could commit such cruelty and that her father was no longer alive. Derek, who was Kiona's godson, also suffered a double pain. He lost his father, and Aunt Kiona, whom he loved like a relative, was involved in the scandal. In addition, his mother was now in a pre-trial detention center. Kiona herself became the object of general accusations. She was not formally tried, but her friends and neighbors looked at her with disgust, considering her a family destroyer. Because of this tremendous pressure from the community, Kiona began to think about leaving as soon as the investigation was over. Meanwhile, Adana was awaiting trial in a pre-trial detention center. Investigators and police talked to her for a long time. She admitted that she was aware of the affair and had relevant evidence, screenshots and a route tracker. But she claimed that she had not planned the murder and that it had happened in a fit of uncontrollable rage when she did not control the consequences of the blow. When the trial began, the resonance exceeded all expectations. The press focused on the atypical love triangle between the wife, husband, and goddaughter. The jury had to figure out whether it was a premeditated murder or an unexpected tragedy provoked by a fit of passion. Anna's defense. The defense lawyers emphasized that the emotional situation had reached an extreme point. The woman received a severe psychological blow and was unable to control herself when she found out that her husband was cheating on her with their child's godmother. Her world and trust were destroyed because of the people closest to her, the defense explained, so she acted not rationally, but in an uncontrollable impulse. The prosecutor. The emphasis was on the fact that Adana, having noticed signs of infidelity, was actually being followed and had enough time to make another decision: to leave, call the police, or talk without violence. Instead, she deliberately went there and provoked the conflict, having known about the affair for some time. She had enough time to calm down, but chose confrontation. At the hearing, they reviewed in detail the photographs of the bloody floor, as well as the size of the statuette, and listened to Kiona's testimony, which described the scenes in the house step by step. The defense insisted that the sudden contact with her husband's mistress could have caused a short-term affect. The prosecutor, on the other hand, noted, When she saw Malik's car in someone else's yard, she could have returned immediately or contacted the police. The result was a weighing of several legal classifications, from premeditated to manslaughter. In the end, the jury decided that there was no evidence of premeditation, but that the arrival to settle the dispute showed a conscious choice to take a risk. Thus, the murder was the result of a severe emotional breakdown, not a premeditated act. Verdict: guilty of manslaughter. The judge, taking into account the totality of the circumstances, decided to imprison her. The media mentioned 5 or 8 years, but it is clear that it will be a real term. After the verdict, Adana was in deep despair, regretting the impulsive step that destroyed her family and cost her husband his life. Kiona felt that she would not be able to live in Coburg any longer, as she was accused of being a divorcee, and began packing up as soon as the trial was over. Amara and Derek have lost their father, and now their mother is behind bars. They will have to somehow explain to themselves and others why the family they thought was unbreakable fell apart because of one violent conflict. The event shook the community. A couple that seemed perfect came to terrible consequences because of an affair that also involved their old friend. In Coburg, this drama is now more often recalled as a warning that even the strongest unions can hide cracks and that double betrayal can awaken dark and uncontrollable emotions. After Anna's sentencing, the emotional wave only grew, especially affecting Amara and Derek. They both returned to Coburg to be at the final hearing where their mother was found guilty of manslaughter. Now they had to live with this bitter reality. Determined and talented Amara, who was building a professional career in pharmaceuticals in Toronto, faced the impossible. Her conflict-free, close-knit family fell apart in the blink of an eye. She was angry at her father for cheating on her, blamed her mother for the fatal blow, and reproached herself for not noticing anything earlier. Amara still found the strength to come to the prison to see her mother, who now looked completely different, broken, and carried only deep pain in her eyes. She reproached Anna with words, though. "Mom, why didn't you walk away, go to the police, or—" She felt compassion in her heart, realizing how deeply the betrayal of those closest to her could affect her. Her heart broke at the thought that from now on they had no father, and their mother was behind bars. Meanwhile, Derek was also suffering from a loss. He had once sincerely loved Kiona as his second mother, and now it turned out that she was his father's mistress. He was in a state of despair and anger. His father had deceived his mother, his godmother had harmed the family, and then everything was cut short by a single blow. Was it possible to avoid this outcome? In search of an answer, Derek met with Kiona and wanted to ask her, "Why did you do it?" But she, under the burden of condemnation and preparing to leave the city, could neither answer clearly nor explain. Her voice trembled with remorse. "I didn't mean for it to end so horribly. I was gnawing at my conscience, but I did not anticipate the deadly consequences." Derek said goodbye in silence and decided not to see her again. Together, Amara and Derek tried to keep in touch with their mother. They visited her, sometimes together, sometimes in turns, depending on the time allowed for visits in the detention center. They did not approve of the murder itself, but they saw the circumstances that led to that momentary rage. Despite the pain, their love for Anna did not fade, so the two children, having lost their father, did not want to lose their mother. It was difficult to explain to their family and friends why Mom is in prison because she accidentally killed Dad during a quarrel. Nevertheless, they supported each other, trying to overcome their shared emotional trauma. Meanwhile, the community turned against Kiona, bombarding her with accusations and rejection. Once friendly and open, she now faced hostility and harsh comments. How could you betray those closest to you who entrusted you with the role of godmother? Some people openly called her the one who destroyed a 30-year marriage. Kiona was afraid to show herself on the streets of Coburg. Everywhere she went, she felt judgmental glances and whispers. This is the mistress who caused everything to happen. Once, she was not even allowed to enter a local cafe under the pretext of a private event, although it was obvious that they simply did not want her among the visitors. Previously, Kiona had a circle of like-minded people around her with whom she was engaged in social activities and organized charity events. Now they all turned away. "I'm sorry, but the situation is too loud and indecent. We can no longer cooperate." So she was left in social isolation. Eventually, Kiona decided to move out. She put her house, where the tragedy occurred, up for sale and moved to another neighborhood or even another province in Canada, planning to start over. Formally, she was not held liable, as she did not directly participate in the crime, although she did provoke the drama. But in terms of emotions, she was left with a burden of guilt and regret. Meanwhile, after the trial, Anna was sentenced to several years in prison under the article involuntary manslaughter. She ended up in a women's correctional facility where she had to adhere to strict discipline, get up on cue, go to inspections, work or study in workshops, and make phone calls only at certain times. Every morning, Adana woke up with a thought: "I took my own husband's life." The memories of that night haunted her. The marble figure, the blood, Malik's confused look as he fell. She reproached herself more than once for not stopping him. She could have simply walked out when she saw him with Kiona, called the police, and then perhaps everything would have ended in divorce, not tragedy. All this time, Amara and Derek wrote her letters and visited her from time to time. Amara would share news of her career in Toronto, and Derek would briefly but sincerely express his support and love. These messages were the only ray of light in her gloomy, everyday life, as she admitted to her cellmate. In prison, she was offered psychological help, and despite her bitterness, she agreed. During the sessions, she shared how the betrayal she felt broke her from the inside. The psychologist explained that in a state of affect, a person is capable of taking a reckless step, even a fatal one. Adana thought sadly, "If I had realized cold sobriety, just walked away and filed for divorce." But the past cannot be brought back.